Prior to the late 1950s and early 1960s, there was an area of Dothan, Alabama that was mostly inhabited by African Americans, known as the Southside, but was also referred to as Frogtown. It was a community made up of residential homes, churches, a school, a few businesses, but mostly the lives and livelihoods of many of the black people in Dothan. It was a close-knit community comprised of families, poverty, as well as prosperity. There were many things that could be done without leaving the neighborhood. You could go to church, shop at a store, grow your own food, go to school, or go out on the weekend and have a good time at the White Horse. Some of the residents lived in nice homes, while others lived in houses that were substandard with no electricity, no inside plumbing. Some had outdoor toilets, outhouses. Many of them would be described as run-down shacks. Most of them were located on dusty dirt roads. Little known to the residents of Southside, a major change was about to take place, which they would have little or no input into what was about to transpire. It was the beginning of what is known as urban renewal. From 1949 to 1974, the U.S. government underwrote the program known as urban renewal, the planned redevelopment and improvement of deteriorated urban areas, often involving demolishing old structures and constructing new ones. It also included the process of seizing and demolishing large swaths of private and public property for the purpose of modernizing and improving aging infrastructure. This program was implemented through a Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD grant and loan program. Much of the time, these projects split or destroyed black communities throughout the U.S. The South Side was no exception. All of its residents were forced to relocate. They didn't have a choice. Here's a former resident describing what it was like living on the South Side.
We didn't know that the places that we lived in were substandard housing at that time. Well, we knew that some of our neighbors had better homes, but it didn't seem to matter because we were all like family. We moved to the corner of Alice and Franklin Street. It was a duplex. I think it was just 2 rooms. That big room, you had your beds, and that was your living area as well, and then the kitchen. And I think the toilet was outside, but attached to the building. So you went outside your back door to go into the toilet. We had the tin tubs, you had to heat water to take baths in. Initially we had a fireplace, but at some point I think we had the iron wooden heater, and we would go to the William Morris Lumber Company with our little wagon and get wood to use in our wood stove or fireplace, whatever it was we used for heating. And so we had a lot of those pieces of wood that were cut like in blocks, maybe 6 inches long, 4 inches wide, something like that. And so I can remember one day we decided to build a house out of those blocks. So we laid it out. We had the kitchen, the living room, and the bedrooms and all. And I was always daring, so the kitchen had to have a stove. So I built a stove out of those wooden blocks. We made our own toys because we didn't get a lot. We got things for Christmas. Maybe you'd get a doll and maybe, some fruit and a book. I always loved to read, so, but during the rest of the time, we made our own. And we would take twine and put it inside of a soda bottle, put the cap back on it, and that was a doll. And we could curl that twine like it was hair, so we would do that. That was one of the creative things that we did. And the other thing that we did, we'd make grass dolls. We would pull up a clump of grass, and the root was long enough sometimes to braid, and we'd make a grass doll out of that. We did all kinds of creative things because we didn't have other things. My oldest sister started school first. She's older. And when she started first grade, I went with her. And because I was learning like the other kids, they put me in first grade. And I think I had to be 4.5 because I turned 5 the following year in March. And I had such wonderful memories of that. I guess I was kind of a precocious kid, and could speak well. And so first grade, I had the lead in the first grade play as Mary, Mary, quite contrary. And I was on stage the whole night, and all the parents were there. And then from there, I went to Montana Street School. The building is still there for grades 4 through 6. But in the meantime, there was our church, New Bethel. I understand it was just called Bethel back then, I think my mother told me. And the church was so much a part of our life. We were involved in all of the little organizations at the church, like the Sunbeams and whatever else was there. And I remember the smell of honeysuckle growing around the church. I always have that memory, and I can almost smell the honeysuckle. And also remembering meeting my best friends, one of whom is sitting over there, Dolores and Linda Daniels, when we were probably preschool. We didn't have free kindergarten back then, but our mothers became best friends, and later they moved into the other side of the house in Mixon Alley. So we were even closer then. But Southside was great. It was community. I remember people you just felt loved by all of the adults in the neighborhood, at your church. When people started getting televisions, we could go to people's homes and watch television at night, because when we didn't have a TV initially, it was just a village, the village that people talk about now, but we really had a village. Everybody knew everybody. You would run errands for the older people, and you always spoke. That's a Southern thing, but in our community, even now, good morning, good evening, whatever it was. And older people, you had respect and reverence for them. You never disrespected your elders. When we moved to the house on Mixon Alley, the Pope family lived. There were only 2 houses on Mixon Alley. The Pope family, Miss Emma Pope, was the matriarch of that family. And she was home all day, like, summertime. Most of the parents were at work. And we would play on the opposite side of our house so that she couldn't see what we were doing. We had to stay pretty much in our own yard. And a lot of times, most of the parents would be at work, and sometimes the other kids would come to our house because we couldn't go, to other people's houses. We had to stay home, and I had to watch my younger siblings too. There were no differences between any of us. We're, some that had nicer houses or whatever. We all attended church together. We went to school together and all that. Just the warm, wonderful feeling. And by the way, my family was the last family to move from Southside because we were waiting for a place. And it was kind of scary because it was dark over there. And later, my mother was telling us, how she was afraid because she's a woman alone with these children, and everybody had moved. And finally, we got the word that we got an apartment in the Martin homes.
The south side of Dothan was a community that relied on each other, filled with people who worked together to make the most of their neighborhood, regardless of the circumstances that they faced. Many of the residents moved to the east side into a newer subdivision known as Lakeview, while some of the others moved into public housing. Whether you refer to it as Southside or Frogtown, it produced many fine, successful individuals, just like the one that you just saw. Today, the Southside is made up of homes mostly built in the 1960s and 70s. Many of them are now occupied by African Americans. Urban renewal may have taken away their homes, but it couldn't take away their spirit.